Well, at ease, paratroopers. If you like that reference from HBO's hit series Band of Brothers, you're going to like this podcast. My name is Kevin Kidder, and after 20 years in the Army, I discovered something unexpected. The toughest battles weren't behind me, they were just different. This is the Enduring Mindset Podcast. In our inaugural season, The Invisible Veteran, we'll explore what it really takes to reclaim purpose, rebuild identity, and restore connection after service. This podcast isn't just for veterans, it's for anyone navigating transition leaders, spouses, teammates, anyone asking, who am I now and what comes next? Each week, I'll share lessons from my journey, stories from others who walk similar paths, and tools to help you build what I call an enduring mindset, one forged through adversity, guided by purpose, and grounded in service to others. Before we dive in, I just want to thank you for being here. I know there are literally thousands of other things you could be listening to, and the fact you chose this podcast means a lot. My hope is that you walk away each week with something useful, a story, a reminder, or even a little encouragement. Phil Laffy LaFountaine is a Christian husband, father of three, and a U.S. Army veteran who served in both law enforcement and special operations capacities. He currently works for a property management company as he pursues his goal of becoming a faith-based resilience coach for men, veterans, service members, law enforcement professionals, and first responders. He served 12 years in the U.S. Army, 11 on active duty, and 1 year in the reserves. And throughout that time, he successfully completed 5 operational deployments throughout the Middle East, supporting counterterrorism objectives. After transitioning out of service, he found himself struggling to cope with a loss of identity, sense of purpose, and PTSD. After a long and arduous healing process, he came to the conclusion that faith was the missing component in his life, and the redemption he felt through Christ was ultimately the only thing that would restore him. Here's my conversation with Phil. All right, dude, welcome to the podcast. It is so good to have you on here.
Awesome, man. Happy to be here.
So normally I start off with a conversation or a story and a description. I want to change it up a little bit. I have to give a big shout out to Kyle for reconnecting us. Kyle, thank you, brother. You've been a big supporter, and this conversation doesn't happen without you. You know, as life does, it ebbs and flows. And after we got back from Afghanistan about a year later, I went to the MP battalion down the road, ended up going to Germany, and you and I fell out of touch. It happens. So again, Kyle, thank you for listening and encouraging Laffy to as well, because it's been great to reconnect with you and to hear your story and now get to share it with our listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Kyle. Appreciate it. And once again, excited to be here and have a good convo.
So we met 16 years ago at Fort Campbell, and I was immediately struck by how much everyone looked up to you. And it's not because, you know, you were junior enlisted at the time, you were a specialist, but our world, E14 leaders, nothing new. But it wasn't just the platoon, it was the company. Everybody, top to bottom, loved you and respected you. And I knew you were going to be a gold mine, not just for those of us that were new and leading at the squad and platoon level, but for the platoon in general, because even back then you were a servant leader. And then once we were told we were on orders to Afghanistan, I knew you were going to be the guy, like the glue guy, the one that does everything to make everybody else successful. And what I remember, the funniest thing I remember is the day we got told we were going to Afghanistan. So we were getting ready for like Christmas block leave. And of course, we're doing a brigade run, which no one is looking forward to. And it's the perfect example of why time management in the military is hysterical. So, you know, the run's going to start at 6:30, and I think we were there at like 4:45.
Yeah, more than likely.
Right? Like, you know, the battalion commander's like, okay, you need to be there at 6. And then the company's like, you need to be there at 5:30. The platoon's like, you need to be there at 5. And squad leader's like, you need to be here at 4:45. Like, what are we doing? We're here an hour and 45 minutes.
Formation to the formation to the formation.
Yeah, it's so funny. And, you know, American Dad, Colonel Jenkins, and I love that formation because you have thousands of soldiers on that field ready to go. They got the music going, great place to be. And then Colonel Jenkins is like, zonk.
Yup.
And everyone's like, did he just say zonk? And he's like, I fucking said zonk. And you see people who have been on no running profiles for years running faster than Usain Bolt to get out of the AO. Like it was incredible. Oh, dude,
Yeah.
I just remember that. And then like I remember being in the parking lot, like, dude, I've never been zonked before. What are we doing? I'm just like, go home.
Everybody was looking at each other in absolute disbelief, and it was
Yes.
so chaotic. It was like if you poured gasoline on an anthill, like just everyone going insane. That was wild. Yeah, absolutely.
That is the perfect mental image. Oh, yes. Um, so as I mentioned before the call, I met Brett Ledbetter at a conference in LA back in April. He is a mental health performance coach. He's an author, a speaker, and I got to attend his breakout session at this conference. And his breakout session was the art of asking better questions. Phenomenal. Got to talk to him at the end, and he plugs his new book at the end of the breakout session, and it's titled 365 Questions Getting to Know Yourself and Your Team Better. And I knew when I started the podcast, I wanted to take his recommendation and make it my own, which is anytime I have a guest, I'm going to have them pick a number between 1 and 365, read them that question for the first time during the podcast so we get a real, unscripted, authentic answer. So, you ready?
Let's do it.
And I know I love this question because it's going to tie into your message so well. So, your question is, what has surprised you most about your life and why?
Oh, wow. Yeah, absolutely great question. And, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself considering,
Hmm.
what we're going to have a conversation about today. But I guess the thing that most surprised me in my life is what you would lean on um, in times of trouble, right? What you would use as a foundational piece to get you through life's worst moments, but then also to celebrate life's best moments, right? And I won't give it away here, but I think it'll shake out as we have this conversation, and we can kind of circle it back if you want. But yeah, that's where I'm going to leave that one at.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's such a good thread, man. Like way to get the audience hooked. Like they're just gonna be like, tell me. So talk to us about growing up, your journey, and what led you to join the military.
Yeah, so I would say that it depends on how you look at normal. A lot of people say, "Oh, I had a normal childhood" or whatever, but I think normal in the context of being a child is different because whatever you're in at that age and stage of your life is what you know as normal, right? And so that's just your perception of reality as you're growing up. And so at a young age, middle class family, I think I was maybe 7 years old. My mom came and had a conversation with me, and she goes, "Hey, like you have a second dad." And I just thought it was super cool. I was like, "Oh, this is awesome," right? Didn't think anything of it, didn't really understand the concept. But basically what had happened is my biological father was out of the picture the first 7 years of my life. And so the man she was married to was raising me as his son, right? And so at this point, I realized that I had two fathers and I was just cool with it. Now, fast forward a couple years, the man who raised me and my mom, they did get divorced, right? I was hit pretty hard by that. And then I really ended up starting this kind of jump around lifestyle as a young kid. My mom was a single mother, so I was constantly being dropped off at other people's houses to be watched, looked after before school, after school, these types of things. Um, and it wasn't until I got a little bit older where it kind of came to a head. My mom had been seeing a gentleman for quite some time, and I was probably 16 years old at the time. And me and this guy just weren't getting along. They were married for a couple years, and we were just butting heads all the time. And so I decided to basically get out of that environment, like leave the house at 16. I went and lived with my buddy for a while. And my biological father was still not in the picture at this point in time. And so, I'm doing a bunch of stuff that a 16, 17-year-old kid does, getting in trouble, experimenting with alcohol and drugs and all these types of things. And a buddy of mine had joined the army and was part of the delayed entry program and came back from basic one summer and was telling me like all these awesome things about it, and just kind of hooked me with it. So it was in my back of my mind. So I graduate high school and in 2007, and I'm working for a company doing information technology, graphic design, stuff like that. And just not really liking where my life's going in terms of career progression, the people I was hanging around and stuff like that. And so I made a drastic decision. And that decision was to move to Florida and live with my grandfather for a little bit, and, potentially go to college down there or find a different job or whatever. And so that's the route I took. When I was in Florida, um, my biological father had come back into the picture, and, we had, communication prior to this, very on and off, not consistent. And he was still kind of in a dark place with what he was doing in his life and things like that. And I just also wasn't getting anywhere with my career down there in Florida, like very lonesome. The grass wasn't greener on the other side. So I was like, hey, man, I'm going to go hit the recruiter's office. And so I did. And I wanted to get into information technology. And unfortunately, I'm colorblind, right? So they're like, yeah, you can't do that. So they threw me like 6 choice jobs to do. And long story short, military police ended up being one of them. And I was like, well, I really want to do this army thing. So let me go ahead and jump into that. And, I can probably do a career in law enforcement when I get out, or whatever the case is. And so that's what got me rolling into the army. Just needed to change a lifestyle, and things like that. And started my career off in military police.
I love that. And this is why I was so excited to have you on. You're such a good storyteller. You're very relatable, but you're so smart. As Goodwill Hunting says, you're wicked smart.
Wicked
Um,
smart.
you brought in Einstein's theory of relativity when you talk about what normal is as a child, right? Like, just you're so smart, and you can take such a complex concept and make it so relatable. And dude, it's just awesome. In the military, you had a couple jobs, couple different MOSs to the extent that you're comfortable with. Share with us what they were, what roles they or you played for the Army, and then what those experiences taught you about leadership.
Yeah. So I served 12 years in the Army, 11 years active duty, 1 year in the reserves. Split my time between military police and special operations civil affairs. And so to start, military police, I would definitely say that when I achieved the position of squad leader, it was the best job in the world.
Mhm.
You have so much freedom and autonomy to lead, develop others, and really go after the mission, with some oversight, but it's not a level of micromanagement that maybe you would see at some of the lower levels. You've been entrusted to basically bring an array of anywhere from 12 to 16 soldiers, downrange, complete missions, and bring them home safely, right? So there's a lot of responsibility there, but it was also the best job.
Absolutely.
Um, I think it was the best leadership opportunity I had at that time. Um, and the way I looked at it about leadership and throughout that time, just in general, in military police was to look at leadership, folks above you, and take the good and bad and create your own style on that, right? And so if I'm taking something good from a leader, I want to go ahead and emulate that. I want to work on that, tweak that, and then exhibit that myself, right? But then the bad, I probably want to avoid that, right? Or take a lesson learned before I end up in a bad place myself, right?
Mhm.
So I really use that as a premise to create a lead by example type mentality with my leadership. And it was also the premise for servant leadership, right? As I saw guys, especially you, kid, to be honest, really mentoring me to be like, hey, like, yeah, there's missions and objectives and things we need to do, and we need to be tight on certain things, but we also need to be taking care of our folks, right? Making sure that everybody understands the mission at the lowest level. And at the end of the day, they're the ones that are doing all the real ground heavy lifting type stuff. So let's take care of them. And I was lucky enough to, and I'm not trying to toot my own horn here, but be distinguished at advanced leader course and
Yeah.
receive the distinguished honor or leadership award while I was there. as well. And so I think taking that kind of funnel system of things and going through, and there was a lot of trial and error too, right? So it's not like you're just like given this gift and you just run with it.
Right.
There's a lot of trial and error that comes with that, and just building on the good and the bad and constantly looking to get better in different ways. So that's kind of the military police side of things. Um, the second half of my career I spent in special operations civil affairs. And so um, for listeners that don't understand what civil affairs does, is they typically identify and mitigate root causes and drivers of instability. Now that's a pretty blanket statement, but some things we would do is enable indigenous and host nation governments. There was support to unconventional warfare and foreign internal defense activities. What we're really trying to do is understand the civil and governance components of the operational environment that affect human behavior, so we can find, disrupt, and deter certain threats that are in support of counterterrorism objectives. And there's a lot of different things that go into that. But when you're in special operations, leadership is different. So no longer in conventional army, where you are typically taking an operations order and you're piecing it down task to subordinate units, and everyone is getting their piece of the pie and everybody understands exactly what the task is, all the way to the lowest private, right? There is a convergence of mission planning. And now we drive operations from the tactical, which is the lowest level, up to the operational level, up to the strategic level.
Mm.
So when that happens, you get a lot more latitude and longitude when it comes to your left and right limits on what you can do and how you decide to plan, how you decide to execute. And so for me, we would typically work in 4-man teams. We had a captain that was our team chief, basically. You would have a sergeant first class, E7 billet, that was the team sergeant. You would have an E6 team billet, which was the reconnaissance NCO, or would be considered the kind of team engineer, if you will. And then we also had another E6, E7 spot for medic, which they went through the same medical course that an 18 Delta Special Forces medic goes through.
Wow.
And so we would operate in these 4-man teams. And when you're conducting missions operationally, there is higher risk with that, right? And so if you're in the team sergeant position, which I served in for a while, you have to take accountability for all the logistical things, the beans and the bullets, but you're also in charge of force protection and medical evacuation. So now we're talking small unit tactics.
Hmm.
We're talking really getting in the weeds of competencies for your skill level 1 through 4 tasks across the board, and really making sure guys are spot on in order for them to make mission happen. Now, in terms of having to deal with that responsibility of leadership, there was also some actual scenarios in which I had to navigate in different ways. And one of those was I was a team reconnaissance NCO, and the team sergeant that was on my team was not as tactical competent as we probably needed them to be. And that's not a problem. Listen, everyone's going to have their weaknesses, right? And in a small man team like that, what you should do is lean on the people's strengths for their jobs and put them
Hmm.
in those roles and positions, but then work together to help everybody on their weaknesses, and just really flush out the team for success. However, this individual was very, how would I say it, a bit hard headed in terms of reaching out for help and things like that. And so I kind of had to do this like lead from the shadows thing, right? Where I wasn't in title or position, but you could kind of see what was going on. But I had to play some politics as well for team cohesion purposes. And so it was a difficult leadership challenge, to say the least. Um, and so, there's another key component of leadership I'd like to bring to light here too, and that's accountability. Um, and I'll give you an example. So on my last trip to Syria, um, basically we'd have to send out a 5W to get out the gate. And one time I forgot to do that. And so we roll out the wire, and the operations center didn't know we were out there. And so I stopped, like, we're like 30 meters outside the wire. And I tell the team chief, I said, hey, I forgot to send it up. Let's roll back in the gate real quick. Go let the op send know we're good to go. And then let's Charlie Mike. Well, he was just like, yeah, we're in sector. We're just going to go. All right, roger that. So we take off. We're gone for 4 hours, come back. And the special forces opsen and command was not happy with that decision at all.
Hmm.
I took absolute accountability for it in front of the E8 op sergeant that was there. Um, got a really nice slap on the wrist with some choice words. And what I mean by accountability, it was like, hey, I owned up to my mistake. I made that mistake. I'm gonna take the hit on the chin. All right, Roger. That's leading with humility, right? Um, and unfortunately, I wish the captain that was with me had a little bit more intestinal fortitude to kind of help me out in that situation. He would later be reprimanded by the AOB commander, and that was a little bit more than choice words. So
Yeah.
it is what it is, but just kind of some different examples of leadership and how I viewed it and some of the things I had to, go through and trials and tribulations with that, working in those two kinds of settings.
That's incredible. And listeners, like you just got the thesis statement to a masterclass on leadership. You honed in on two very important things, which are self awareness and accountability, right? And I think probably the most well known author or speaker on it is Jocko Willink. Y- Phenomenal, him and Leif Babin, what is it? Extreme Ownership. Phenomenal book, phenomenal podcast, videos. They own Echelon Front. Again, I'm not sponsored. This is just stuff I follow. Um, and the extreme ownership is exactly what you just described. Like, hey, it was my job. I messed it up. I'm not going to flick the booger. I'm going to go, tell on myself, hey, I was supposed to do this. I didn't do this, and I will face the repercussions. As the middle or junior guy on that team, you could have been like, well, you guys outranked me, no one checked me, but you play by big boy rules in that environment, especially. But you own it, man. And the worst thing that, yeah, you get cussed out. Like, cool, like it's the military. Segue here. Kind of loving this whole message that's being reintroduced to the military. Like, your feelings really aren't important. Your job is to go fight and win wars. You need to be in shape and get with the program. And I love all the Marine reels I'm seeing. The Marines are like, this has been you guys are doing something different.
That's
Like,
funny.
I love the Marine, dude. I fought with the Marines in Iraq in '04 to '05 and on the job. And those dudes, like, and dudettes, because they had some women, dude, they could fight, period. And they loved it. They would roll out in soft skin Humvees or open, kind of armored, like deuce and a half or five, to just to draw fire so they could pick a fight and kill bad guys. Like,
Yeah, I would say that was part of the transition for me to go from conventional to special operations was one, at this point I'm starting to get super inundated with my career, realizing one, I have a skill set for this, I'm a high performer, but I wanted more, right? And so I was like, hey, I need to get with a group of guys where like we can just get after mission, right? Whatever that looks like. And I wanted to be with higher caliber folks to be able to do that. And that really is what drove my decision to cross over. And I found a lot of that, and I also found some folks that slipped through the cracks and this and that. And I would get frustrated at that, because I kind of had this hard charging mentality. Shout out to Kay for that. Where, it's just like, hey, we got to get after it. And this is it. Like, we got to meet all these standards. We need to be exceeding the standards. We need to be performing. Like, people don't understand, like, all right, yeah, you're getting deployed or whatever the case is. Like, you're training for war, man. Like, why would you not want to be the best in every single aspect that you could? Your life is on the line, So, like, let's get with the program, like you said. And so, it's unfortunate, but into my later years, and then my brother's in the army now too, and just hearing some stories and conversations, there's a little bit of disappointment to see kind of the trend. But to your point, we're now seeing it kind of flip 180, and we're getting more of that back. And that's what we need to do, right? If you look at
mhm.
what the mission of the armed forces is, right? It's not to be cool looking in uniform, right? It's to win wars and protect the country, right? So we need to have the capability and competency to be able to do that. So let's get after it.
Dude, it's so funny. I'm listening to Jack Carr's new book, Cry Havoc. He's my favorite author. He's former Navy SEAL. Um, and it takes place in Vietnam. And it's total fiction, but he uses a lot of historical accuracy in his writings. And he's talking about who the French guerrilla warfare commander was before 1964, before the US went into Vietnam. And this guy was saying that he wished his country had two armies, one that was polished and pretty, and they were on all the TVs, and that's who they took pictures of, and the country would always see. And then he would have another army that was just straight up warriors who didn't want recognition. They just wanted to go and fight and win. And he's like, no one would ever see them. And that's great because they would never have to worry about being identified and they could operate autonomously. But it just reminds me of that. And I just think it's so funny. And I think that mentality of I want to be around like minded people who don't want they don't do stuff for recognition or awards. They do it because it's what needs to be done, and the people to their left and right are going to be of the same mindset and be the best of the best. Kind of like how the Currahees were back in World War II during Band of Brothers.
Yeah, and you're picking at some things again, right? And so we're talking about um not settling for mediocrity,
Hmm.
right? That's one thing we're talking about. And we're also talking about that humility again, right? Being humble, like I don't need to have all the awards and all this other stuff or whatever. Like I'm here to do a job and I understand the seriousness of it and it is what it is.
Dude, you said something about being a squad leader, and it's so funny because anybody who's listened kind of understands I struggled with my identity getting out of the military, and it's taken me a long time. And I was pretty ashamed of retiring as a staff sergeant because, you should have been a sergeant first class or you could have made a higher, whatever. But when you said that, I was like, dude, being a squad leader was the best time I had in the Army, hands down, period. And I loved it. The men and women that I got to talk with every day, the ones that I could hopefully make a positive influence in, it's the greatest opportunity. And just, you help me shift my paradigm even now 4 years out, still struggling, like you said one thing and it totally changed my lens on that, and I thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And just real quick on that too, like it depends on obviously what kind of the organizational hierarchy looks like, right? And so, like in MPs, like E6 is squad leader, staff sergeant, right? You hit that sergeant first class, your platoon sergeant, your responsibilities change not drastically, but you're probably not going to be rolling on as many missions and doing things like that. You're going to start leaning into that operations, or maybe you are doing operations. And basically, what that means is like you're probably doing a little bit more paperwork, a little bit more computer stuff. You're not as lively. You're still leading, but maybe not as actively, right? And in special operations, like everyone always talked about, like, hey, how long can I stay on the team? I want to be a team guy for as long as I can.
Hmm.
And so in that realm, you can probably be on a team as a E6, E7, potentially E8, depending on what you're doing. And the minute they're like, oh man, you got abroad and you got to go to ops, everyone's like, dude, all right, what can I do? Can I get on another rotation with another? Like everybody wanted the team time. You know what I mean? And that's
Yeah.
that's really what like people wanted. They wanted the lead, they wanted the camaraderie, they wanted the brotherhood and so on and so forth. So like you're not the only one in terms of like looking at that viewpoint, you know?
Yeah. I just mentioned about how I've kind of struggled. When you left the Army, what did transition look like for you?
Yeah. So when I transitioned out, so basically there was a lead up to transition. So I had come back from Syria in 2017 after my fifth rotation and I wanted more. And so I got hired by 2nd Bat 75th Ranger Regiment to go take a job up at JBLM. Basically, the way it was put to me was like, hey, go down to Ranger Assessment Selection Program, go ahead and pass that. And then you're going to come up to JBLM PCS across country from Fort Bragg, North Carolina, all the way up there. We're sending you to Ranger School right away. 64 days, first time go, if you can get to it.
Hmm.
And then you're going back to Afghanistan like right away. Like we're already set up for the whole thing, so on and so forth. So it would have been my sixth rotation. So um, I am at Ranger Assessment Selection, and I've already got through all the physical gates, all the check the blocks, if you will, right? Like
Hmm.
basically just don't quit and you got this. Um, and I'm having a long conversation with my wife, Dre, and, you know, we just realized that that whole move, and we had just had two kids, like close in age and everything like that. It was like probably to like, let's have this conversation about where's everything going to go. And so long story short, I voluntarily withdrew from the selection process,
Wow.
went back to brag, told my command group, like, hey, I need to take some leave. I need to figure some things out. And ultimately decided to transition out of service. I had just been selected for promotion to sergeant first class and turned down a $30,000 bonus to head over there to Washington State. And so I just decided to put my family first, right? For probably the first time in my career at this point. And so I got out, did a 1 year contract in the reserves. They don't have civil affairs in the National Guard. And I began going to college full time to be a strength and conditioning coach. So I wanted to basically give back to the military and first responder community by becoming a tactical athlete strength and conditioning
Hmm.
coach. So um, my first 2 semesters, man, 4.0 GPA across the board, just crushing everything out. And then my third semester, COVID hits. Um, and when COVID hit, it's also the same time that I started realizing I was having symptoms of post traumatic stress, right?
Okay.
Um, there was an instance at one of these reserve events. We did like this land nav course. And after that, there's like a mall and a food court. So we all went in there. It's pretty busy. Um, and I'm sitting at the table with my food and I like black out at the table. And like my head didn't like hit the table or anything, but like I kind of came to and was like super freaked out and was like checking if anybody, saw what was going on with me or whatever, and just kind of like stuck with it. So that was like one of the first indicators of like, hey, something's off here. Um, but after I got out of the reserves and, COVID is still lingering, I'm trying to do college at home while my son's trying to do, first grade on the laptop at the same time. It was just very difficult. And then I just got hit with everything. And I think it's important for the listeners to understand what everything is. And so, raw and unfiltered, here it is. Anxiety. I dealt with anxiety extremely bad. And I'm talking about your typical like heart racing a little bit, getting worried about things, all the way to having full blown debilitating panic attacks, right? I'm talking
Mm.
fainting, passing out, literally shaking, tremoring out, not being able to control, shortness of breath. And these would last in bouts of 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, right? And we're talking multiple times a day, right? So anxiety and panic was really bad. I would get bouts of flashbacks. Dre found me in my closet one time with my kid on, curled up in a little ball, just like losing it, right? Um, Depression. Um, the high level of anxiety would crash me into depression, right?
Hmm.
And so I would literally go sit in my room, and this is not an over exaggeration, 10, 11 hours wide awake, staring at a wall, not speaking. I got kids coming in, I got my wife coming in, trying to say words, all like just non-responsive, non-functional, like just absolutely isolated, alone, not there, non-functional. And so we would just I would just bat this around, right? Anxiety, depression, anxiety, depression. And it created issues with motivation, had brain fog. And I was really dealing with a huge lack of purpose and loss of identity, right? Um, it took me a while to realize that I was just so inundated with my career and who I was as a, special operations soldier and all this, that when that all stopped, I didn't know who I was.
Hmm.
There's this constant theme about like, all right, I'm chasing the next tab, I'm chasing the next school, the next deployment, so on and so forth. And I just spent so much time doing that that I didn't know who I was when I was out, when all that was gone. Um, you couple that with all these PTS symptoms, and my life was hell for a good 3 years. And unfortunately, and my nervous system was just shot too, 5 deployments, constantly being put into threat environments and things like that. I remember being in a grocery store and just like absolutely losing it, like with panic and anxiety and anger. And I'm like, dude, I don't get this. Like, hey, please, somebody just go throw me in a firefight right now and I'll show you what's up. Like, I'm good to
Mhm.
go. Like, that's all I wanted. Like, I didn't know how to function in society. I had no idea how to handle these things. Right. And so, um, it came to a point where one day I had probably my ninth or 10th panic attack, not an exaggeration, by 10 a.m. in the morning. And I made the decision that I was going to take my own life. And so I wanted to go into my shed and grab my pistol and end it right there. But I couldn't muster up the courage to do it because I didn't want like my family to find me that way. Right. And so I ended up calling the crisis line, the veteran crisis line, and talked to some lady on the phone. She was like, "Do you need help? All this?" Like, yeah, absolutely. So, can you get to a hospital? Do we need to send somebody to you? I said, no, I can get it. And so, I went and handed my father-in-law my pistol, and he drove me to the hospital, the local emergency room, and then I was transferred to a VA hospital about 40 minutes away, where I would spend the next 3 weeks inpatient um, for treatment, right? And we're talking like I go into like this detox facility basically, right? Um, Orange jumpsuits, chairs filled with sand that you can't throw through windows,
Mhm.
like the whole nine. Take your shoelaces away from you. There's not really much to do there, and I would be in that facility for about 2 weeks as I began initial kind of counseling and treatment protocols and things of that nature. Um, After the 2 weeks, they kind of bring you to a lesser version of that. You can get your shoelaces back, your cell phone charger, so on and so forth. And I was there for another week. Um, got on a bunch of prescription medications, and there was discharge with follow on therapy and things like that. Now, I had made the decision to seek help, right? I'm taking
Mhm.
accountability for this.
Yep.
Need to go seek help, call the crisis line, go through this. So now that I've gone through this, I need to continue this healing journey, right? And so, I'm getting on the phone with counselors and psychologists and psychiatrists, and I'm like, all right, yep, this. And I start going through the different therapy modalities that the Veterans Affairs Administration offers. And so, I looked at my healing journey very similar to a mission. Okay, if I do A, I'm going to get to B. And if I do B, I'm going to get to C. And I'm chasing this end state objective, which is a sense of normalcy.
Mhm.
So I go through cognitive processing therapy first, which is basically um, looking at how traumatic events affect service members' thinking, right? And they make you basically like write out like the worst thing that's ever happened to you through this 8 week program, and you talk about it with a psychologist. It was heart wrenching, and I think it was either an 8 or 10 week program, and I was at like week 6 or 7, and I was like, I'm just done, couldn't do it anymore. So they were like, all right, like let's find you something else. So all right. So they brought me through cognitive behavior therapy, CBT. And it's really understanding the effects of post-traumatic stress on relationships. It explores changing thoughts and beliefs related to PTS. And so I went through that entire protocol. And I'm picking up some tools along the way. And there is some progression, but I'm still dealing with the anxiety and the depression a lot, with maybe few bouts of suicidal ideations from time to time. Mind you, I'm struggling with substance abuse this entire time, alcoholism, marijuana use. Okay. And so I move on to prolonged exposure therapy, which is a gradual approach to basically address traumatic memories, feelings, and situations. And so we did this to kind of work on my anxiety. So I literally like sitting you know, VTC teleconference across from my therapist. And he's like, all right, man, like, I want you to just like breathe like a gorilla all crazy. I'm like, all right. What he's doing is he wants to get my heart rate all the way up, right?
Mhm.
And then I'm going to sit in that. He's going to see how long I can sit into it before I get into a level of comfortability again. He's trying to create a panic response without something that is stimulant to me that typically puts me into that situation. And
Right.
so we go through this and we go through this and we go through this. Well, while I'm going through all these programs, they had told the VA there had told me about a specialized program. Apparently, there's only two in the country, and one happened to be at my local VA out here in Massachusetts.
Real
Um,
quick,
yep.
just for the listeners, so were these inpatient or outpatient? Like, were you, like, living at a center, or were you trying to live a normal life while going through these processes?
Yeah, absolutely. So I did the 3 week stint. I was discharged, and then everything else was on a weekly or bi-weekly basis that was either remotely administered via VTC, or I would drive to the local VA. So I'm still kind of like, living here at my house, trying to figure out life, so on and so forth. And that's why I said I was kind of still struggling with substance abuse and other things
Okay.
at the same time.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
So they basically told me about this specialized program. It's a group therapy, PTSD inpatient protocol they have. They called it Ward 9. That already sounds scary.
Mhm.
Um, and I was just like, once again, on this A to B to C mission, like, if I can just get to one more thing, like, I'm going to get better, so on and so forth. And so I decided to sign up for it. And I voluntarily did another 30-day inpatient stint focusing on um, acceptance and commitment therapy, which is really learning to accept unpleasant thoughts and feelings rather than fighting them. And then going through probably for me the most beneficial therapy modality, which was EMDR, which is eye movement
Mm,
desensitization and reprocessing therapy.
okay.
So here's the setting. You're in the hospital. It's cool. They have it set up like dorm rooms. You wear civilian clothes. You're not in jumpsuits or anything. It's laid back. You have sessions every morning. Um, you have all these classes, and they let people share their stories and talk about their feelings and so on and so forth. Well, I was in a group of probably 5 or 6 other men, and it was like me and this retired sergeant major were like the only ones that were, in my opinion, kind of putting in the effort
Mhm.
to share and have conversations. Now, I can also understand the other side of the spectrum in terms of just being kind of shut off and unwilling to talk about things that really suck, right? And so there is some compassion I have for those guys. Um, However, I didn't feel like I was getting what I needed to get out of the group therapy. So once again, I go do this EMDR, and not to spend too much time on it, but I had a great clinician, and the typical protocol for this is that you would spend anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes once a week going through this process with either a light bar or someone using a hand signal. And the way it works is it basically opens up parts of your brain that allow you to relive trauma experiences and then process them on the spot. Um, well, I decided to do it every day for 2 weeks for an hour to an hour and 15 minutes.
Wow.
And I needed that. And my clinician, Molly, was a godsend, and she helped me get through so much and process so much, but it was so difficult. I'm literally just like, I feel like I'm like in an hour panic attack every time I'm in there.
Mhm.
And so I get out of that program and I'm starting to feel better, working on things. It's a work in progress, right? And I remember getting to a point where things were starting to progress in the right direction. However, I just knew things were still off. And I had been um, introduced to mindfulness and things of that nature while I was there, meditation for calming the mind and all this stuff while I was there at the VA. Well, started using that as the basis to lean into a pillar of resiliency in the spiritual realm. Okay. And I started to do a lot of yoga. I really like the mind body connection and the flexibility it gave me. And I was always still into working out and doing these types of things. Um, Doing just, daily meditation routines and body scans to try to be in the present moment and all this. But it started to go down a route where I started getting really interested into things like shamanism and horoscopes and runes and crystals and pendulums and different things of that. This wave of new age kind of spirituality.
Yeah, so I don't mean to interrupt. It just something popped into my head. So you are going through a physiological transformation at this point, right? Mind and
Yes,
body. So I think a lot of people, I've done that. I have fallen into, rabbit holes on researching. You said horoscopes too. That was a big one. Like, I've always been the guy who's like, oh, silly me, I'm an asparagus. Like that's just the way. But I think there is maybe something behind where you're born throughout the year and how that impacts your personality or character traits.
I think in retrospect, what I'm doing is I'm trying to use these things to find my place in the world again.
Yes.
Right? That's what I'm trying to do. I am trying
Mhm.
to explore and research and experience something so that I can find where I belong again.
Dude, amen. You said that perfectly, and again, just another watershed moment in my brain, like, and I can't wait for the next part of this conversation, but, like, we were meant to reconnect right now for a very specific reason, and
Absolutely, brother.
I think we've both struggled with that concept. Who am I? Why am I here? What is my purpose? Dude, it's just so incredible, right? Please continue. I'm gonna shut up because I can't wait to hear what else you
No,
have to
you're
say.
fine, man. I mean, I'm not trying to hog the mic, but I
No,
really
I want
want
you
the
to hog it,
listeners
please. Your story has
to
been so compelling already, and I feel like this is where the movie takes off. Like we're in F1, which is my favorite movie right now, and like we're getting to the part where Sonny starts winning, and like Laffy is just about to drop just some incredible stuff. So please continue.
all right, there's a little bit further we got to get. And so as I'm going through this kind of new age spiritualism, I'm researching alternative health protocols to help me still deal with my PTS and my substance abuse and things like that. I think there was a point, and granted, I'm giving you guys a lot of things that probably spanned over a 3 year time frame. Um, when I'm starting to get into some of this more new age stuff, there was a period where I was sober from alcohol for like a year and a half, right? Which was great. And I was like, hey, I'm going to go do psychedelics. Like, that's the next thing. And so I go to Vermont, or excuse me, New Hampshire, and I go take magic mushrooms, man. Right. I did them as a kid, but like I did this with a very specific intent for healing and all these things. Um, and so I go have this experience that lasted anywhere from 5 to 7 hours. Um, and it was interesting because it it felt like I was ripping fear out of my body through this experience. Like fear
Wow.
was coming out of me, and I was like, this is scary, but this is also great. And so after the experience, I felt like super refreshed. Um I felt like I could see the world in a different way, and I felt very renewed, and there was a sense of joy, and a lot of like the depressive symptoms and anxiety went almost completely away for about 3 or 4 months.
Okay.
Things started to trickle back in. I'm like, all right, cool. Um, so once again, what's next? Well, very close to pulling the trigger on going to Mexico, um, and going through an iteration of 5-MeO DMT, which is a psychedelic drug that you smoke that it lasts like a minute and a half. And there's results from different studies that say up to an 80% complete remission of PTS symptoms.
Wow.
Also helps with substance abuse and all these other things. And I was also looking into ibogaine. Um, Now, I never actually went and did those things, but they were definitely on the radar. So
Okay.
now so now that I've got like a little bit more comfortability in my daily life, I got back into a career field in which here in Massachusetts, it is legal to sell and buy cannabis. And so I was heavily into the research about cannabis as a medicine and the therapeutic value that it can provide to people. And so I was self medicating and then also made a career out of it. Um, and so for 3.5 years, I basically rose from bottom of the barrel, basic, they called it bud tender. So think of like a barista at a
Hmm.
coffee shop, but you're just like the first one selling people weed, um, all the way up to managing retail and security for an award winning dispensary. Meeting with CEOs, COOs of different companies. I was on a national cannabis podcast and things like that. Um, but with that came some baggage, right? And so I realized once again, a couple things. One, I was overworking. Okay. So I spent so much time trying to make this new career for myself. I'm now trying to re identify myself with this career, just like I
Hmm.
had done in the military.
Yeah.
Right. Um, and, my wife called me out on it. And I was like, yeah, you're absolutely right. But, I'm also like, tired of working for other people and stuff. So I'm going to just resign my position, start my own company, and do some consulting. I had some good relationships and network opportunities that I was going to try to, capitalize on and get my own business rolling, so on and so forth. And so I did that. Completely walked away from the mainstream industry, started my own consulting business, and could not land a single account for 7 months.
Mm.
Now, when you work for yourself, sometimes you can have a lot of time on your hands. And so a lot of the PTS stuff start coming back, a lot more anxiety, a lot more depression. And I noticed that I was no longer using the therapeutic value of cannabis, but I was using it to numb and mask out the PTS symptoms.
Mm.
So I kind of went back to square one a little bit there. But it took some reflection to realize that. Now, simultaneously, my wife Andrea was feeling a calling from the Lord to come back to her Christian roots. And so we would have conversations about Christianity. And for the listeners out there, I did not grow up in a faith-based home. God was rarely spoken about. I didn't grow up in the church, any of those things. I was agnostic at best, but probably more atheist, just like, hey, you live for the world, and when you die and close your eyes, that's it.
Yeah.
Um, and so I've literally exhausted every single resource that I know to try to find some kind of healing from PTS and myself. And this is where the story turns. So one day my wife's like, hey, why don't you check out this faith faith-based resiliency program called Mighty Oaks that's strictly for veterans and first responders. And she said faith-based. And I was like, what? Yeah, nope, not going to that. Nope. And I spent some time the next couple days reviewing it. And one night I watched every single YouTube testimony from alumni of that program. And one common message really showed up, and that was just show up.
Mm.
And so I submitted an application to go to Mighty Oaks. Um, and if you're familiar with Chad Robichaud, he used to be CEO of this company. Chad Robichaud is a ex Force Recon Marine law enforcement official, and then also a professional MMA fighter. Um, so, anyways, go to the program, and it's basically a week-long program where other men there, the cadre, they share their stories and their trials and tribulations of post-traumatic stress and all this. And then they talk about how Christ has led them through it or been their foundation to help them get through these things. And what I really love about the program is the vulnerability of the instructors, how candid they are about things. But here is the key takeaway: the details of everyone's story is different. You just heard all my details about the anxiety, the panic, the depression, what I did, so on and so forth, like in detail in terms of panic attacks and coping with this and that. Um, but those larger themes of those symptoms being anxiety, depression, suicidal ideations, loss of purpose, loss of identity, all those things were felt throughout the room, regardless of what the specifics of those stories were. So now I'm like, I don't feel alone in this. Like, I
Hmm.
just don't feel alone. And they're veterans and first responders that know exactly what it's like to go down range and deal with these situations, know exactly what military civilian transition looks like, knows exactly what so on and so on and so on and so on. And so April 26th, 2024, I made the best decision of my life. I publicly pronounced my faith in Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior. I was
Let's
baptized,
go.
and I was dead to sin, alive in Christ.
I'm so happy to hear that.
Amen.
So, wow, just what an incredible story and journey you just took us through. My microphone is so sensitive. I haven't brought out pen and paper. I need to start doing that and taking notes because I want to come back and just revisit so much. But we'll just have to have you back on. I think that's
That sounds good, man.
okay. So you made the best decision of your life. And since then, how has your relationship with God changed the way you see the world, you see strength, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm used to warfare, right? A lot of us that are veterans or military or law enforcement, like we're used to warfare of a certain kind. It's a warfare that you can see, right? Whether it be terrorists, criminals, whatever the case is, dangers all out there. But the thing that most people don't realize is that there is warfare that each and every single one of us is facing every day, and it is in the spiritual realm.
Hmm.
All right. So Ephesians chapter 6 says, finally be strong in the Lord and his mighty power. Put on the armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rules, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. All right. And so when I look at the way I see strength with God is if I put my identity in him, uh, and know that I'm a son of God, right? Know that I'm a child of God, and know that there is this spiritual warfare going on, right? I look to Christ as my foundation. So every time I'm depressed and I'm telling myself that I'm not good enough and I'm not worthy and I don't have this and all that, and I'm getting all angst up and I'm about to have a panic attack because I'm struggling with dealing with the thoughts of what's next and being patient and all these things. I go to what Christ says. I go to what the Bible says. All right. I go to prayer about these things. That's where my strength is found. All the tools and all the resources and all the counseling and all the therapy modalities have given me some perspective and have given me some tools. However, nothing compares to the strength that I find in Christ. Right. And so I use prayer as a first line of offense, not a last call for defense.
Right.
Right. And so many, and listen, not a self-righteous comment, just trying to help people grow. So many Christians out there or so-called believers will say that, like, yeah, just like everything's terrible, like I'm going to pray about it. Like, no, like pray about it before things get terrible.
Yeah.
Right?
Prayer can
Like,
be an offensive weapon. It is an offensive
absolutely.
weapon.
Yes, like let's be proactive about prayer, right? And it helped me go from what felt like when I was helpless, right? um because of not getting success in the VA model, to hopeless, where I wanted to take my own life, to being hopeful only in Jesus Christ now. And so that's the way I see strength now is I got to go to the Lord. I got to go to the Lord, whatever it is I'm dealing with. And the truth of the matter is too, is this is not some magic bullet, some magic pill or whatever the case is. There's nowhere in it that says like, you will not have trials and tribulations. Okay. But I guarantee you put your faith in Christ. He helped you get through the storm. And there is scripture
Absolutely.
about that. There is stories about that.
Well, and every time, dude, you're hitting on something so profound right now, and it's something that I'm just really coming to terms with myself. But Second Timothy chapter 1, verse 7 says, "For God did not give us a spirit of timidity or cowardice or fear, but he gave us a spirit of power, of love, and self-discipline." So if you are hearing messages that are in the negative, that's not God. That's the enemy. And I love how you take a tactical approach to faith. Like a lot of us are, I'm guilty too. Um, we use prayer as a Hail Mary, as the last resort, when really it should be the number, it should be your M4, your primary weapon on the battlefield of this spiritual attack that's going on. And it's alive and real, folks. Like, there's a spiritual battle going on. If you've ever watched Supernatural, it was super entertaining. Kay and I used to have date nights in Afghanistan and watch it together. But like, I think we're living that right now. There are evil forces on this planet that are trying to wreak havoc on us because God loves us and we are his children. And the best, most effective tool you can use is to get on your knees and pray fervently. And if you don't know how to, fine, start doing it and then learn how. Find books, reference the Bible. Like, that's the best way to figure it out. But dude, what an incredible um definition and explanation you just provided. Thank you.
Yeah, and listen, I don't want to belabor the next comment I'm about to make. We can leave it and then just kind of let listeners sit in it for a minute, I guess.
Hmm.
Um, Charlie Kirk's assassination was not right versus left. All right, it was good versus evil. That's it.
What spiritual disciplines or practices do you use to keep yourself grounded?
Yeah, so big takeaway from Mighty Oaks was this philosophy of the 4 B's. So be in prayer, be in the word, be in community, and be in contact with the corner man. And so I think be in prayer is pretty self-explanatory. Be in word, read scripture, read God's truth, right? Be in community. So finding fellowship with like-minded individuals and Christians, right? And then be in contact with corner man. So um, this one's super important, trying to find um, men particularly in your life, or even for the women out there, find a woman that can kind of help you out, help support you, encourage you, be able to share hard conversations with and keep you accountable. Now, I don't mean an accountability partner. All right, I'm talking about somebody who can see your blind spots, poke you in the
Hmm.
chest, and tell you when you're coming off track, because that's what we need. And so that's part of it. I like to do daily devotions and prayer in the morning. Fasting has been helpful. And then also consumption, right? So what am I taking in? And I'm talking everything. So depending on like the music I'm listening to, depending on the movies and things I'm watching, what podcasts I'm listening to, all these different things is going to affect um, what I am, what is influencing me, basically, right? And so if I can stay on the narrow path, I'm probably doing that by not necessarily leaning into secular music as much as I used to,
Hmm.
or into super violent or um, shows that promote sexual promiscuity and stuff like that, right? Those types of things.
That's amazing. I love that you said consumption because when we're consumers of our world and of our environment, unfortunately, we probably only think that of what we put into our body from our mouth. So food, alcohol, whatever. But you consume with your eyes, you consume with your ears, you consume with your heart. And I love that you bring up secular music. Caitlin and I were talking about this 2 days ago, and my Spotify playlist has changed drastically. I still love my country, my 80s butt rock, and my 90s hip hop, but the first 20 or 30 songs on my liked music right now are all worship songs. And I play it when I'm getting in the shower. I play it when I'm in the truck driving to work and I've got a 40-minute commute right now. Like it changes. You know, what we watch on TV, we don't watch a lot now. Uh, yeah, just again, another brilliant point because of course you're amazing.
And then here as well. So these are things that I do to keep myself grounded in my faith, because that's what I rely on my strength to have a sense of normalcy and understand my identity, right? And I'm not saying that if you don't do these things that you're wrong or you're bad or whatever, right? Because if you're listen, the truth of the matter is we're all dirty, wretched sinners, man. All
Absolutely.
right. Romans 3:23, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, right? And so I slip and fall and I make mistakes and so on and so forth, but I know how to get back on the horse, right? So just wanted to put that out there.
Because you're being a leader and you're being a servant leader and you're saying, hey, this is what worked for me. And you're not berating people. You're not saying if you don't do this, you're going to be wrong. You're just saying, hey, man, I've been through a lot of stuff, which you just thank you for sharing everything. But this worked for me. And, if you're in the same place, give it a shot.
Absolutely.
Um, And you just, I mean, you described what brotherhood and sisterhood means to you. And I would like to ask, how can we as veterans be better at reaching out to each other, not just when things are good, but especially when we're struggling? And Simon Sinek, he said it perfectly on one of his talks. He said, "How dare you deny them the opportunity to sit in the mud with you?"
Yeah. So this was an interesting this is an interesting concept for me because I have reached out when things are not good to other veterans and friends. Um, and I've kind of gotten like mixed reactions or responses, right?
Hmm.
And so like I reached out to a buddy of mine that I did 2 tours with and was like, hey man, like I'm struggling with alcohol, I'm struggling with PTS, you know. It was just like I think he didn't know how to respond really, like surface level kind of responses. You know, he wasn't like ready for like the weight of the conversation, right? And so like if you're that brother, like you need to be ready for the weight of that conversation when someone comes up to you and they just going to dump it on you, right?
Hmm.
And you, oh, well, it's not fair to me and all this. It's like, no, why would you even think that, right? Like they're confiding in you for so on and so forth, right? Like you need to be that support mechanism, and it's okay not to have all the answers, right? But it's important to continue to try to check on that person or work with that person on certain things, right? Um, and it all comes down to taking action, right? Just doing it, having responsibility and accountability, whether you're on the good side of things and you need to check in on somebody, right?
Hmm.
Instead of being like, hey, like, yeah, I've seen their Instagram, their social, like they're looking good and all that. Like, we're really great about putting facades on, you know?
Yes.
Um, and so we need to break through that, right? And you're not always going to get the home run conversation. And maybe everything is okay, but at least you know, like you've put out the attempt. But if you don't take action, you'll never know, right? And when we do these things, right, we should do it in love, right? Colossians 3:14 says, and over all these virtues, put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity. They're talking about compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, patience, all these things. That's how you stand firm in the faith. That's how you stand firm, regardless of faith, to your friend, to your buddy, or whatever the case is, whether things are good or whether things are bad.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you've been the lucky recipient of a phone call where someone is saying, "Hey, I'm struggling," please understand what an honor it is, because that person identified you as someone who can help them. And that is such a privilege, and the amount of courage it took for that person to reach out. And it's okay to say, "Look, I don't have the answers, but I'll sit here with you. I can listen. I may not be, a wealth of knowledge in this topic or have the words, but in any way, shape, or form, if it's on the phone, if you're FaceTiming, if you want me to drive to your house, if you want me to catch a flight, like, thank you for entrusting me with that. How can I help you? Even if I don't have the answers." Yeah.
Absolutely.
What a great point. So, as you look forward in life, what does your legacy look like to you now, especially that faith is, a core part of your foundation?
Yeah. So bear with me on this because this is something that I take a lot of attention to, put a lot of thought into, that I try to follow up with as much action as possible. And so when I look at who I am and who I am as a man, I always go back to biblical truths, right? I'm kind of developing this sense of pillars of biblical masculinity. What does it mean to be a man of God, right? And I just want to cover a couple of these pillars, and it's going to shake out. So I should be able to protect, right? And when people first think of that, they're like physical protection. Absolutely. Like I need to be able to stand in the gap against good and evil to protect my family, loved ones, so on and so forth. Okay. Um, you hear the term meekness sometimes in scripture and things like that. Meekness is not weakness. What meekness is the ability to basically sheathe the sword when you need to. All right. So having sound judgment and know when you need to go ahead and take care of things. Right. Um, and understanding that protection for my family when it comes to the spiritual warfare that we're in. You know, one of my favorite pieces of scripture, 1 Corinthians 16:13 and 14 says, be on guard, stand firm in the faith, be courageous, be strong, let that all you do be done in love, right? Like I need to be praying out loud over my family. These are things that I need to be doing as part of a protection measure and part of the protection pillar as a man of God. The next pillar is really talking about provision. Now, what I saw a man or a father do in terms of provision as a kid, the example that was provided to me was strictly material and financial.
Mhm.
All right. Roof over your head, food, all these things, whatever. Now, there is a component of that that needs to be met. However, provision is also mentally, emotionally, and spiritually with your wife, with your family. All right. Once again, gentleness, kindness, humility, listening, being empathetic, right? Ephesians 5:25. Husbands, love your wives like Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. You should be dying to yourself and not seeking comfort. So many men go out there and they seek comfort in so many different things. Listen, I searched the world. I sought the comfort through alcohol and drugs and abuse and all this other stuff. Like it's crazy. So I get it, but these are the things we need to be doing in the pillar of provision. Also, leadership. We've talked a lot about leadership here in this segment. So that's, leading with courage and humility. We talked about this, taking accountability, being open about flaws, right? Now, I've always talked about, hey, what's the difference between a manager and a leader, right? And a manager is someone who's really focused on basically the what and the how. They're really focused on structure. They're really focused on standards, objectives, and goals. All right, that's great. Well, what's a leader? Okay, they're going to be a little bit more focused on like the so what or the significance of the activity. They're typically going to be looking at, how to inspire and motivate. And they're also going to be looking at kind of that human component, the development of others, the welfare of others. Okay. Now, you can be a manager and not be a leader. You can be a leader and not be a manager.
Mhm.
Okay. It's when you blend the two together that you are going to be successful. Right. And so if we look at what it is to be a man of God in Mark 10:45, we have the perfect example. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. That is sacrificial love, servant leadership exhibited by Jesus Christ. Right. And so when we talk about leadership as well, if you've seen it in a military component or a law enforcement component, all right, you're constantly training up the next generations of leaders to go ahead and take your place, right? And so leadership is also transition. That's my legacy for me. I have, two boys and a daughter, and my legacy is how am I leading them so that they can be the men and women that God designed them to be, right? And this is acts over words. Okay. This is leading by example in everything you do. When they're young, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, yeah, you can sit down and have that little talk lesson with them, but they are watching you. You need to be
Mhm.
leading by example in everything that you do, right? And so my legacy is really how I exhibit myself as a man of God, right? So my sons can grow up to be men of God. My daughter can be a woman of God. And furthermore, when I'm done with the whole entire thing, I'll know that I've fought the good fight, I finished the race, I've kept the faith, and I will hear, well done, good and faithful servant.
Let's go. I absolutely love that response, and it's so funny because that is the series we're in my church right now, Christ Church of the Valley (CCV). Check him out on YouTube. Ashley Woolridge is absolutely an incredible pastor, and the title of the series is "The Men We Need," and he's almost paralleling exactly what you're talking about. Biblical truth about men. Um, I encourage you to check it. I'll send you the link after. But listeners, go on to YouTube, check it out, especially if what Laffy just talked about resonates with you. Like, it's incredible. This whole conversation has been incredible, and I hate that it's coming to an end. But I do want to ask you one final question, which is if you could leave one message with anyone listening, a veteran, first responder, a believer, a non believer, someone still searching, what would it be?
Yeah, so I got two questions for the audience. First one is, do you want to get better? And if what you're doing now isn't working, why not try something new? And if you listen to the journey, I tried everything and I took action because I wanted to get better and I tried something new and I now have a redemption story. Praise be to God.
That's incredible. Dude, thank you so much for coming on, for sharing your story. You're so well spoken, so vulnerable, transparent, honest, and encouraging. And it has been just an absolute pleasure to reconnect with you. You know, God works in mysterious ways. It's his timing, not ours. And I don't think he could have picked a better time for us to get back into each other's lives. I love you, man.
Amen, brother. Appreciate it. Love you too.
Man, I don't even know if words will do this one justice. Laffy, brother, thank you for showing up with your whole heart. This conversation wasn't just powerful, it was real. It was about pain, redemption, and the courage to turn back toward God when the world feels lost. Before we hit record, Laffy prayed over us. He prayed over the show and the listeners. His testimony is authentic and legitimate. To everyone listening, if you're walking through a dark season, remember this: you're not too far gone, you're not beyond grace. What you've done doesn't define you, it's what you do next that does. Laffy, I'm proud of you, man. The world needs more voices like yours, honest, unfiltered, and full of faith. Thank you so much for trusting me with your story. And to everyone tuning in, if this episode moved you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. You never know whose breakthrough might start with your small act of courage. If you're listening now and you're struggling, or you know someone who is, listen, you are not alone. Call 988, reach out to someone you trust. Make sure they're a fountain, not a drain. Your story is not finished yet, and the world is better with you in it. In this episode, Phil mentions Mighty Oaks. Again, I'm not sponsored by anyone, but this seems like a phenomenal program. And if my podcast or guest can help even one person, then it's worth it. The Mighty Oaks website, the About Us, What We Do section states Mighty Oaks is committed to serving military and first responder communities who have endured hardship around the globe through intensive peer based discipleship programs, outpost meetings, speaking, and resiliency events. They have programs for men, women, and married couples at multiple locations nationwide and globally. To those who attend our programs, I'm sorry. Those who attend our programs are fully sponsored to include meals, lodging, and travel, ensure their sole focus is on recovery and empowering them to identify their purpose as they move forward. Thank you for listening to the Enduring Mindset podcast. If this episode spoke to you, share it with a friend, family member, or colleague who might need it. Give us a follow on Instagram, Threads, and X at enduring_mindset_enterprise. Until next time, onward, forward, fall out.